You've been in relationships with some famous women. You've dated some of the biggest superstars of all time. Anything you can share with us about Cher?
Oh, she's a wonderful lady. Loving mother, caring. She's wonderful. I treasure the time we had together, and she's still a friend.
Legendary rocker Gene Simmons once had it all: a stellar career and a love he called his first and only, with Cher, a woman he'd spend hours calling internationally from Japan just to talk to. And yet, it was Gene who single-handedly destroyed that love. All because of a Christmas gift that Cher herself suggested he left her for her best friend. Was it selfishness, or was there something deeper? This is the story of how a misguided rock star lost what might have been the most precious thing in his life. Prologue: Two men in one body. To understand why Gene Simmons left Cher, you first have to understand who Gene Simmons really was in 1977. By then, the band Kiss was one of the biggest musical phenomena in the world. Their albums sold millions. Their tours sold out across 3 continents. Kiss merchandise was in every American supermarket. But there was one strange thing. The public had never seen the real face of any band member. Kiss always appeared in thick makeup, foot-high platform boots, black leather studded with spikes, and especially the persona Gene built for himself, a black and white demon called the Demon. He spat fake blood on stage. He stuck out a tongue so long it became a cultural icon. Beneath the makeup was a completely different person. His real name was Chaim Witz. Born in Israel, he grew up in Brooklyn in a poor Hungarian Jewish family. His mother was a Holocaust survivor. Gene grew up in a cramped apartment, read books all day, and was so frugal he became known for being cheap. In his private life, he was quiet, well-read, and obsessed with investing and making money. This contrast created something no other rock star had: the ultimate superpower of complete anonymity. Once he took the makeup off, Gene could walk through Los Angeles, go to the grocery store, or grab a coffee without anyone recognizing him. While every other rock star of his era had to hide from fans, he could go on a date right in the middle of the city. It was this chasm between the Demon on stage and Chaim Witz in real life that drew Cher in. And it was that same chasm that a few years later would cause it all to crumble: the president's party and a case of mistaken identity. Their first meeting happened at the most formal of events, a 1977 reception for President Gerald Ford, hosted by Neil Bogart, the head of Cher's record label at the time. The guest list included politicians, movie stars, and a few top music industry figures. Cher was there as the label's star. Gene was there as a member of Kiss. When the two were introduced, Cher paused, trying to place the name Gene Simmons. And she blurted out the name Gene Simmons, a 50-year-old British actress who had been making films since the 1940s. It was the kind of opening line that should have killed any chance of romance on the spot, but it didn't. By the end of the night, Cher wrote in her memoirs that she was impressed. Gene took her home that evening. Nothing happened, but the next day, he returned with a gift no one could have predicted: a complete set of Kiss merchandise, t-shirts, posters, stickers. But not for Cher. It was for her son. Chaz Bono, 9 years old at the time, was a massive Kiss fan. His parents were showbiz royalty, but Chaz had his own idols. And suddenly, one of those idols was standing in his living room. This wasn't a spontaneous gesture, it was a calculated move. Gene understood something few men did back then. To win over a mother, you win over her child first. Cher had been married twice, and she dealt with men who couldn't handle the role of a stepfather. Gene's gesture toward Chaz hit her right where she was most vulnerable. A meeting that should have crashed and burned over a case of mistaken identity had turned into a very intentional beginning. Warning signs from day one. If winning over Chaz was his first victory, their first official date was a disaster. Gene invited Cher and a friend of hers to a concert by the band The Tubes. Throughout the evening, he didn't just hit on Cher, he hit on her friend too, at the same time. right in front of her. Cher recalled in her memoir how she just stood there, watching the man who'd just been introduced as her suitor flirt with the woman sitting next to her. When the night was over, she went home without another word. The next day, Gene called to apologize. Her reply was ice cold. Both she and her friend were no longer interested. That should have been the moment Gene Simmons lost Cher for good. But a few days later, Kiss left for a multi-week tour in Japan, and Gene started calling. In 1977, an international call from Tokyo to Los Angeles was outrageously expensive, costing several dollars a minute. Most people wouldn't dare talk for more than 5 minutes. Gene called for hours, night after night. By the end of the tour, his phone bill had run up to $2,800, a staggering sum back then. And during one of those calls, he told her he loved her. Cher wrote that she was shocked. They hadn't even kissed yet. They'd only been on one date, and it had ended in a train wreck. The words, "I love you," were coming through a phone line from the other side of the world, from a man whose feelings she wasn't even sure of. She wrote a short, poignant line in her memoir, almost as if asking herself, "What are men?" But the answer was already there. By the time Gene set foot back in Los Angeles, Cher was completely won over. The best 2 years of their lives. In 1978, they officially moved in together. 2 houses, one in Los Angeles, one in Malibu. They appeared publicly on The Mike Douglas Show. They went shopping together. They took Chaz to school. And for the first time in years, Cher felt like she was in a truly stable relationship. In October 1979, People magazine gave them the cover. In the long interview inside, they both opened up about their life together. Gene described Cher with the phrase, "my first love." He said he'd never had a long-term girlfriend before, never lived with anyone. He spoke at length about Chaz and Chastity, Cher's 2 children, in a way no one expected from a rock star. Cher said something that many still remember today. "This is the best relationship I've ever had with a human being." It was a powerful statement. Cher had already divorced twice from Sonny Bono and Greg Allman. She wasn't the type to throw words like that around lightly. But behind that perfect facade, a crack was already forming. In that same People interview, they both admitted their relationship wasn't strictly monogamous. Cher described herself as being in a very open phase. She accepted that Gene might spend the night with other women on tour as long as they were gone by morning. In return, Gene accepted Cher going out with other men for companionship. That was their arrangement. On paper, it sounded mature and modern. In reality, it was a ticking time bomb. Because during those years, Gene Simmons publicly held a view he would maintain for decades. Marriage is an institution, and he didn't want to live in an institution. Cher didn't push. Gene didn't ask. They both believed they were building something new, something that didn't need a ceremony or a piece of paper. The problem is, freedom without boundaries will eventually be tested. And that test came one night in December 1979. The Christmas gift that destroyed everything. This is the part of the story Gene has told many times. In his 2002 memoir, in an interview with Howie Mandel, with Andy Cohen, the details have remained virtually unchanged for 40 years, which shows just how deeply this moment is etched in his memory. It was late 1979. Christmas was approaching. Gene was about to head back to New York for Kiss rehearsals, and he was faced with the question every man dating a superstar has to answer. "What do you get for the woman who has everything?" he asked Cher directly. Her answer was the most harmless-sounding suggestion in the world. Her best friend, Diana Ross, was in New York. Diana knew her better than anyone. "Call Diana," she said. "Tell her I sent you, and have her take you shopping." Gene did exactly that. He called Diana Ross, mentioned Cher's name, and was invited to her apartment. When he walked in, 2 things hit him at once. Diana Ross was sexy in a very different way than Cher, and she was completely in command of her world. She made him coffee. She offered him a piece of chocolate cake. Gene ate it so fast, she offered him another. The second piece disappeared in seconds. They talked. They became friends. They started playing racquetball together. The mission to buy Cher's Christmas gift faded into the background and then disappeared entirely. Something else had taken its place. Gene has insisted in multiple interviews that he had no intentions when he first set foot in Diana's apartment. He was there for a gift, but in the weeks that followed, their friendship crossed a line, and Gene knew it. He didn't stop. Cher didn't find out through the rumor mill. She discovered it through one specific, gut-wrenching detail. At the time, Gene had bought Cher an apartment on Fifth Avenue in New York. Cher hired her own interior designer to furnish it. When it was nearly finished, she flew to New York and realized something. Gene wasn't staying in their apartment. He was staying a few blocks away, at Diana Ross's place. By the summer of 1980, it was all out in the open. People magazine ran a special issue on Kiss, and the article confirmed that Gene Simmons was living with Diana Ross and her children. There's a nearly unbelievable detail from that period. During a Kiss rehearsal in Los Angeles, both Cher and Diana Ross were in attendance, sitting near each other, watching the man they had both loved perform. It was civil on the surface, but underneath, it was an irreparable breakdown. The years-long friendship between Cher and Diana Ross ended right there. They never spoke again. Gene, with his unique ability to compartmentalize, remained in touch with both of them for decades. The real reason Gene never married Cher. The question of why Gene Simmons never married Cher is more complex than most people think. Because the truth is, during the 2 years they were together, neither of them really wanted to get married. Cher had already been through 2 failed marriages to Sonny Bono and Greg Allman. Both left scars she wasn't in a hurry to reopen. In 1979, she publicly described herself as an open woman. She didn't believe in the constraints of paper. Gene was on an even more extreme end of the spectrum. He quoted Groucho Marx every time he was asked, "Marriage is an institution, and I don't want to live in an institution." He repeated that line for 3 decades, in radio interviews, on talk shows, in his own memoir. So, on the surface, the answer is simple. Gene didn't marry Cher because neither of them wanted to marry anyone in 1979. But that's not the real reason. The real reason emerged in interviews Gene gave in his 70s. In a conversation with Howie Mandel, he admitted something few men in his position ever do. He called his actions toward Cher selfish and disrespectful. He said he had a chance with a truly phenomenal woman, and he completely blew it. This is where the paradox returns. The demon on stage wanted absolute freedom, to live without ties, to burn down everything in his path. But Chaim Witz, deep down, was afraid of the very commitment he needed most. Those 2 parts of him could not be reconciled, and Cher was the price of that conflict. The relationship with Cher didn't end because Gene decided not to marry her. It ended because Gene made a series of choices that made marriage, or any kind of future, impossible. The woman who saved Gene Simmons. In 1983, Gene met Shannon Tweed at the Playboy Mansion. Shannon was a Canadian actress who had just been named Playboy's Playmate of the Year for 1982. By then, Gene had been through the relationship with Cher, the relationship with Diana Ross, and by his own later admission, relationships with about 5,000 other women. From the outside, he was not a man looking for stability. There's a strange detail about this meeting that Gene himself laughs about. Shannon Tweed's sister would later marry Diana Ross's brother. This means Gene went from Cher to Diana, then from Diana to Shannon. And somehow the web of these 3 women became intertwined through family. When a Los Angeles Times reporter asked him about this coincidence in 2011, Gene said simply, "If God and fate have a sense of humor, this is a strange one." His relationship with Shannon started like all the others, but it didn't end like them. Shannon stayed. She stayed through behavior that Gene himself would later admit would have made most women leave in the first year. In a 2018 interview, Gene described the first 29 years of their relationship with a single word: jackass. He was a jackass, self-centered, slept with whomever he wanted, came and went as he pleased, with no explanation. He called it a prolonged period of absolute selfishness. In 1989, their son Nick was born. In 1992, their daughter Sophie was born. Fatherhood didn't change Gene overnight, but it began to shift something inside him, slowly, year by year. Starting in 2006, their family starred in the reality show Gene Simmons' Family Jewels on A&E. For the first time, American audiences saw their relationship without a PR filter. There were arguments on screen. There were times Shannon confronted Gene directly about his infidelities. And then came the moment that became the real turning point. In 2011, the two appeared together on the Joy Behar show. Behar asked Gene about his 5,000 women reputation and joked about his back. Gene responded with a flippant joke about his rock star lifestyle. Shannon stood up in the middle of the live broadcast and walked off the set. She moved out of their home shortly after. The press covered it for weeks. For the first time in nearly 3 decades, Gene Simmons faced the very real prospect of losing Shannon for good. A few months later, he proposed to her on their reality show. In October 2011, they were married at the Beverly Hills Hotel in front of 400 guests. Their daughter was the maid of honor. Their son was the best man. After the wedding, Gene said something that people still quote today. He looked at the wedding ring on his finger and said he truly didn't understand what he'd been so afraid of all those years. The belated epiphany. In 2024, on Steve-O's podcast, Gene Simmons described the moment that finally made him decide to marry Shannon. It wasn't romantic. It was fear. He said in the interview that at some point, he realized that if he continued on his path, he was going to die alone. A miserable, pathetic old man. The people he loved most, his 2 children, and Shannon, who had never once nagged him about marriage, wouldn't be there. He thought that if he were Shannon, he would have already remarried someone else and found happiness while he was still alive, instead of wasting more years on a self-centered man. In that moment, he got down on one knee. He, the man who always described himself as emotionless, confessed his love for Shannon in a way he never had with anyone before. It was the moment that closed the entire journey. From Cher to Diana Ross to Shannon. From the demon to Chaim Witz. From a man who torched every relationship for fear of commitment. To a man who finally understood what commitment really meant. And Cher? 40 years after the New York story, she wrote about Gene without a trace of bitterness. She wrote about the Christmas gift. She wrote about Diana Ross. She wrote about the loss. But in all her recent interviews, she still speaks of Gene with warmth. A smart man. Charming. Someone she thinks of with affection, not anger. She even once took credit for the Kiss reunion in 1996, saying she was the one who encouraged Gene to do it. The woman who was left still speaks well of the man who left her. That probably says more about Cher than anything else in this story. Neither Gene nor Cher has ever said what they had wasn't real. Gene called Cher his first love in 1979 and has never taken it back. Cher called their relationship the best she'd ever had with a human being, and she's never taken that back either. The feelings were real. The ending was a result of choices, not incompatibility. Gene Simmons is now in his late 70s. He's married. He has 2 grown children. He has outlived the rock star era that defined his fame and built something he admits he almost threw away. The man who refused to talk about marriage now looks at his wedding ring and wonders what he was so afraid of all those years. That might be the most honest thing he's ever said. About Cher, about Shannon, and about himself. So, what do you think? Was Gene Simmons leaving Cher one of the biggest mistakes of his life? Or did everything happen exactly as it was supposed to, based on the people they both became? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you liked this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. For more fascinating stories, click the next video on your screen. You never know what you'll discover next.